Welcome back to Comics Are Dope, the podcast. I'm your host, BJ Kicks, and today you get to hear my conversation with David Harper, who is the man behind the website Sketched.com and the Off Panel podcast. When it comes to this sort of air quotes comics journalism field, there are very few who, anyone would consider a respectable journalist. And there are even fewer whose names carry the weight and cachet that this man's does when it comes to respect among creators in the industry. He's sort of the last of a dying breed, and he's a huge part of the reason why I wanted to make Comics Are Dope what it is. When I think of the vision for the future, it's very much inspired by the things that this man is doing. And so I think you guys are going to enjoy our conversation about his passions, the origins of his platform, why he does the things that he does, the way that he does them, and ultimately the art of the interview. And that's why I titled this episode what I did. But before we get into that, I try not to date these episodes too much, although there is a reference to the NCAA tournament, which at this point has been over for like a month. Just tells you how far in advance we did this. But this weekend, if you're listening to this on release day, is Free Comic Book Day. It is the most wonderful time of the year, as far as I'm concerned. But if you go out to your local comic shop, there will be dozens of titles that the publishers have designated as Free Comic Book Day books this year. So you can go and grab samplers of all sorts of upcoming and past material, see if you like it, go to your local comic shop, support them with the things that are actually on the shelves for you to buy. Most shops make a day of it, so you likely will find some sort of back issue sales. If you are in the Raleigh-Durham area, every Ultimate Comics location has a different sale. The Cary location has a signing for the, I think they're having a signing with the Flash Gordon team, actually. So there's a lot, or it's the Gotcha Man team. That's what it is, with Tommy Lee Edwards. But there are so many things going on in the Raleigh area alone. So feel free to come out. I will be at Ultimate Comics Raleigh this Saturday afternoon to document some of the day and have fun on my favorite comic book shopping day of the year. And I hope you'll join me no matter where you are. I hope you make a visit to your local comic shop and just, show your support to your local comic shop for the sacrifice that they're making to bring these free comics to you. But anyway, with that plug out of the way, I hope you enjoy my conversation with David Harper of Off Panel. Well, guys, my next guest you may know from his website, Sketched.com, where he writes, for my money, the best articles on the comics industry. But if you're a cheapo, and I'm joking, but no, if you don't happen to read the articles on Sketched, you're probably most familiar with him from his podcast, Off Panel, which also, for my money, is the best comics interview podcast on the internet. So I'll go ahead and introduce our guest today is Mr. David Harper. How you doing, man, today?
Doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's late. It's the end of the night, but I'm excited to be here. I really appreciate you joining us for the show.
Of course. Can I tell you a fun fact really quick?
Okay.
So it's funny. Sketched is actually a lot more work, but I feel like most people know me for Off Panel. And I suspect it's just the paywall versus not being paywalled. But at the same time, well, and also it's reading versus, podcasting. But it's interesting how people are always like, oh man, I love Off Panel. And also Sketched is there. And I'm like, that's cool. That's fine. However you want to do your thing.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. And I guess there's no order for this, right? So, because for me, I've kind of been doing things, you might say, backwards. I started out on YouTube and, I've grew a lot during the pandemic. It's kind of slowed or steadied at this point, but it's YouTube. And on YouTube, there's like this rat race, right? It's like every week, maybe even every day, got to post something, got to hit the algorithm, got to do all the things. And maybe about a year and a half into it, I started to kind of feel a little bit disillusioned with YouTube. I still enjoyed comics and I like talking about them, but there was something about YouTube specifically that kind of made the experience feel cheap. So I started the website Comics Are Dope. And initially it was supposed to just be a blog where we didn't just talk about like movies or like gossip or whatever, but it was just comic talk. And I quickly found I did not have the time to populate that website with articles in the way that I would have wanted to. And so maybe a year later, I kind of settled on the idea of a podcast. Like I love that on a podcast, there's conversations that I can have that, wouldn't necessarily perform well on YouTube. And it's not like they necessarily perform well in audio. It's just that you care about the stats a little bit less. And you can almost, you can approach podcasting almost as an art form without thinking about the commercial aspects of it. Um, but I'm curious to know from you, because when I started kind of surveying the landscape, it's like, okay, well, one, who's already doing what you're doing? Is there anything that you'd like to improve about what it is you're doing? And is there anybody that's already doing it as well as you'd like to? Right. And
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
me, when I saw Sketched, I was like, oh, this is how I think it should be done.
hmm I think that the things that I'm bad at are
Hmm.
kind of the things that I do for my day job, which is kind of
Hmm.
funny. So my day job, I'm a vice president of digital for an advertising agency. And so my job is doing digital marketing, digital advertising,
Hmm.
like social things, et cetera, et cetera. And I know the way you're supposed to do things,
Hmm.
but for some reason, I just don't want to do it. I think it's because it feels like work to me. It feels like I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm off work, time to start doing my job again, but for my own stuff.
Hmm.
And so I have this extreme resistance to promoting my thing, what I do. And
Yeah.
so the vast majority of what I do is promoted through word of mouth and like a kind of meager amount of social media stuff that I do. And
Hmm.
so when I look at like a podcast like Comic Book Couples Counseling,
Hmm.
I'm doing this feature this week actually for Sketch that's about comics and podcasting and the relationship between the two. And I talked to Lisa and Brad Golix and the two people who do that show, and they are so on it when it comes to social media stuff
Hmm.
that it just makes me feel super lazy.
Hmm.
And there's a part of me that wishes I was better at promoting all of this because I feel like even though my show is popular and my or popular-ish, what is popular even for a podcast? But my show is pretty well known
Hmm.
and Sketch does pretty well as far as what I'm trying to do. It could be much bigger.
Yeah.
And so doing, whether it's doing like the social posting and building a community that way, or like what a lot of podcasts do, like, what you do, it's like where you're putting it, it's an audio podcast, but then you also put it on as video.
Hmm.
Like I wrote about this in my newsletter, you responded to it. One
Hmm.
of I find it really interesting how a lot of podcasters have so fully embraced video because it is a way to um, basically build virality
Yeah.
and get people to see a clip and then discover the podcast through the clip that they see.
Hmm.
Now, I'm kind of resistant towards video. Like this is a horrible thing to admit, but I had my hard drive was like totally filled up, and I could have done one of two things. One, I could have put all of the historic video that I've recorded over almost a decade of recording my podcast on a
Hmm.
external hard drive, or I could delete it. And I deleted all of it because I was like, I'm never going to use this. I haven't used it in 9 years. Why would I start using it now?
Hmm.
And it's just because I don't know. I'm sure you run into this where it's like you know what you need to do, but like you said with the podcasting thing is, to some degree it's an art form, and you want to do what feels right to you as a person who creates something. And for me, I weird like this is such an artiste thing to say, but it's like to some degree it almost feels like cheapening it where I tried to like turn it into like a circus. I just
Right.
want the podcast to be the podcast, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally get it. I get it. I don't know if I would have deleted the 10 years of history,
I kind of
but
regretted it after I did it.
I'm just a hoarder. Like I've got book reports from high school still
Sure.
on hard drives somewhere. Like uh back in my pirate days, right? Like I'm proud. I've only ever lost like one file ever. and it was just like some stupid movie that I didn't really need, but it does take up space. It and the question always is like, what are you keeping it for? And then you get to a point where you're spending more time just like maintaining the libraries, moving things from one drive to another because you're afraid it's going to fail one day. Like it's a whole thing. And if you're not going to use it, you might as well delete it.
Yeah. I mean, that's true, but at the same time, it's like it's something that type of thing, even from like a personal memento standpoint, is like I could
Mm,
look back and be like, look, I talked to this person. Like, there's a
yeah.
video of me being an idiot. My big regret, though, this is going back to the pirate thing. I used back in my first job out of college, I was working at this telecommunications company, and one of my coworkers stole my iPod, and it had all of my music that I'd built up in years and years and years. So both
Hmm.
the pirate days, but also I worked at a college radio station where I basically ripped every single album I could get my hands on, and they had a massive library.
Nice.
And I had it all in an iPod, and it was the only thing I didn't have it backed up.
Hmm.
I just had it on the iPod because I was like, why would I need something else to back this up? I lost all of my music, like a decade of like tens of thousands of songs that I can't even remember what was on there. And like that one, I genuinely miss that. I
Yeah.
miss that. I don't think I'll miss the video, but I miss my music.
Yeah, no, that's a tough one. Now that I think about it, I think I parted with all of my music. But when Apple Music first launched, they had this thing where you could basically back up your iTunes library to the Apple Music cloud. And that's the reason I pay the $10 a month, even though
Oh
I
yeah.
only ever use Spotify. Because every now and then, you want to hear, the Drought 3. And
Sure.
that's not streaming anywhere. That is a file that you had to download from some mixtape site or LimeWire usually. And that's the only place it exists. So
Yeah.
there we are.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So no, you've been doing this a minute. You're well over 400 episodes in, but what made you start the podcast?
So before I did the podcast, I wrote at a comic site called Multiversity Comics, and I'd been
Mm,
doing that for about 5 years. And I'd done some interviews that had been pretty successful, where I had talked to some people in like an audio format, and I realized I liked that way more than I like doing email interviews, which was a
mm,
lot of the work. To be honest, the benefit of email interviews is it's an extremely lazy way to do it, and there's pluses to being extremely lazy.
right.
But you just have much better conversations when you actually have a direct conversation. And so when I was leaving that site and I was going to do my own thing, I had already thought the weird thing is I had a name for my podcast before I'd even gotten to the podcast. I always knew I
Mm,
wanted to call it Off Panel. And because I'd been doing this writing for that site for 5 years and people had known me pretty well, it was actually 5.5 years. Um, I had built up relationships, so I was able to get like some pretty decent guests beforehand. So I really just want to do the podcast because I like talking to people and I'm always
mm,
curious about what people do. And I thought it would give me a good path to being able to talk to people in a variety of roles around comics. I mean,
mm,
the funny thing is like one of the podcasts that gets brought up to me the most is I did this episode with this lawyer named Caitlin Damata,
mm,
and she is a person who works with a lot of comic creators to like look over their contracts and like when they're doing media deals and stuff like that and make sure that they're not signing a bad deal.
mm,
And I actually like 2 weeks ago, I had like a creator email me about that podcast and be like, I discovered Caitlin because of this, and like, do you know any other comic book lawyers or anything like that? And I'm just like, unfortunately, no. Caitlin's the only one I know, and I just I just like talking to people who kind of make this world work. And
mm,
whether that's a writer or an artist or a colorist or a letterer or somebody who works at a publisher or a lawyer, someone who starts a comic book convention, whatever. I'm just curious. And so I want to find the stories. And I thought off panel would be a good way to do that. And
mm,
it's the interesting thing about it is it's just this may come across as like gloating, but it's just really easy compared to writing. Like writing
mm.
is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so doing a podcast where it's like I record an episode for an hour and then I edit it and then I get it out there and like the total work in it is like 3 or 4 hours.
Hmm.
That's not bad. Like I've written articles that have taken me 4 months to write,
Yeah.
and that's a huge difference. It turns out in time, in terms of time.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, you write really well researched articles as well, right? Like you're pulling in quotes from people. I'm assuming there's like days of emailing back and forth,
Oh yeah.
jumping on the phone, right? Like chasing people down. What motivates you to go to such lengths to do this?
There's two things I think. One is again curiosity. Like for
Mm,
example, the article that took me 4 months to write was I did an oral history of the 2015 Marvel crossover Secret Wars,
mm,
where I talked to Jonathan Hickman, the person who wrote it, the artist Esad Ribic. I talked to Yves Svorcina, the colorist on the book. I talked to Tom Brevoort, the person who edited it, as well as his teammate in editorial, Will Moss. And then I talked to an array of other Marvel editors and Marvel creators who were kind of associated with it through tie-ins. And I ended up having between all of, because almost all of the interviews, the bulk of the interviews were recorded over Skype actually back then.
mm.
I had something like 80,000 words of interviews where I put
Mm,
that together. And I just, the reason why I was willing to go through all that was because I was really curious as to how they did that. And
mm,
I find those people to all be pretty interesting. The other part is because I feel guilty if I don't do the work
mm,
where I try to tell the story right. Like I'm never thinking about the people I did talk about. I'm thinking about the people I didn't talk to. Like, for example, I mentioned that article about podcasting.
mm,
I talked to, I only think like 5 people, and I feel terrible about it. Which is,
mm,
I reached out to other podcasters. I I tried to talk to like different types of shows. I had a couple other ones kind of vaguely arranged, but they never ended up panning out.
mm.
And then another one that I reached out to never responded to me. And there was a part of me that was like, I should hold this and wait until it's perfect. But then I kept thinking about the whole saying, like, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good.
Right.
And I realized that sometimes me going to such lengths where I end up having as many quotes as I have is just like crazy behavior. And like maybe
Yeah.
I should just let it happen.
Yeah. Now I'm curious to know like how much of that you feel is pressure because of like the weight of your platform. Like I know for me, like as my YouTube presence grew, I felt like I needed to cover more types of stories or I needed to be somehow create a more faithful representation of whoever or whatever it was I was covering. Like, is there a degree to which you feel if I don't get this right, no one will ever have gotten it right?
I think there's part of that. I think that there's a part of me that wants to make sure that if I'm telling a story, that I do it justice.
Hmm.
So there is part of that. But there's also part of me just being weird. And like this is
Hmm.
just who I am. Like here's a weird example. In college, I went to I went to school for business, and I went to a business school in the West Coast, and
Hmm.
um, one of the final course, actually the final course, was basically like a simulated business system where you everyone in the class gets split up into these different groups where you run a different business, and it's in like basically like a fantasy business situation where you're all actually, interestingly enough, given the sneakers behind you, competing in selling sneakers.
Huh.
And you had to like manage um, marketing, you had to manage pricing, you had to manage materials, you had to do all this stuff, and it was all built into this computer system. And it was
Hmm.
something that was used by a lot of different universities as a way to help get a practical understanding of what running a business is actually like.
Right.
And I've always been obsessed with like fantasy sports.
Hmm.
I've been playing since I was like 12, like back in the mid 90s. And I because I don't want to like let opportunities pass, I use the internet to find the person who had somehow gotten the best score in the entirety of that year of that system.
Uh-huh.
I reached out to that person and I scouted like basically the best ways to do that system.
Hmm.
And like so basically I was just doing like scouting and research on a class that somebody else, it wasn't at my school, it was somebody who went to like a much more expensive business school, I'll put it like that.
Uh-huh.
And this person had a lot of really great feedback, and I used a lot of that feedback to guide the moves. And basically, I ran our entire team, and we just completely smoked everyone.
Hmm.
And we got number one by far. And anyways, and it was this great thing, but like it was great for my grade because like I crushed the class. But at the
Right.
same time, that's just kind of how I think. I
Hmm.
don't like leaving opportunities behind. And so I think it's a combination of I want to do the work justice, but also it's just how how I work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think because one of my questions here was just how you decided on, like audio and writing versus something like, YouTube. I did a video not crazy long ago about Michael Davis, like one of the four co-founders of Milestone, because that's just uh, one of the subjects I talk about a lot are Milestone
Sure.
comics. But so I did this video because Michael's pretty vocal online about how he feels like he's not receiving the credit that he's due for specifically co-creating the world around Static. And so I did a video just kind of laying out like his claims versus like, what else has been said about it. But really just kind of just ended up being like, hey, here's the story of Michael Davis as told by Michael Davis. And then also, because I've had conversations with all these other people involved, here are, rebuttals. And I felt like in that moment, I realized like I would never be a good documentary filmmaker because in a documentary, like you start with the story and you kind of assemble whatever research you can find to support the story that you've already decided to tell, as opposed to my approach trying to be more like a journalist and just saying, here are all the facts. And I felt like the video wasn't as good as maybe it could have been because I never really picked a definitive side of the argument. It was just here it is. But I feel like in the written word specifically, you can tell a story or you can lay out facts, and there's a certain degree to which it's like, hey, the story's still breaking. Hey, check back later. Or, you know, this was a curious thing, and we can put a period on the end of that sentence and it's fine.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, that was, I don't know if there was a question there, but yeah, I was curious to know, like, to what degree you felt the same thing about writing.
I definitely think that they're different species because, like, the thing is, I think it's interesting. I think this is a YouTube thing, and I don't
Hmm.
really know if I fully understand it. But people who watch YouTube, when they see something and they like believe it, it isn't just like a belief. It's almost like it becomes definitive, even
Mm.
if it isn't actually definitive.
Right.
And like, and I think to some degree, people will watch things and they'll be like, "This reflects my viewpoint," and so this is the definitive truth, as opposed to like, "This is actually the truth." It's just a truth.
Hmm.
Uh, and the interesting thing though is like I don't know if I necessarily agree with your perspective on documentaries. I think the idea that documentaries are showing one perspective is not necessarily a newer thing, but it's
Hmm.
definitely a type of documentary where it's like, you know, like watch The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls one, where it's just
Yeah.
basically propaganda for Michael Jordan, or
Hmm.
like the recently there was the Dynasty one for the New England Patriots, where it's
Hmm.
just propaganda for Tom Brady, basically and everyone else just basically gets omitted from the story besides to compliment Tom and Bill Belichick to some degree.
Hmm.
And like those types of things, or even like Super Size Me. I don't know if you ever saw that, the
Yeah.
documentary about like eating McDonald's and the health issues that it, you know, puts together, as if anybody ever was like, you know what's healthy? McDonald's. No
Right.
one thought that.
Right.
But anyways, there's those, but there's also ones that kind of prevent or present complex topics
Hmm.
as they are, which is complex. And so you want to show all sides. I think the way that you did it is great. I think that, you know, especially for a subject like that, where there's a variety of perspectives on what really happened.
Mm,
It's useful to show that for context, and I do think that that is easier with the written word than it is with video. And also, I
mm,
mean, and here's the thing. I mean, you know this probably way better than I do. Typically, the things that do really well when it comes to video and also just a lot of things online is people respond more strongly to strong takes
yeah.
where it's, there's a reason why ESPN shows are always like, you know, LeBron James isn't the GOAT. He's like not even the 10th best player that's ever played on the Lakers. And you're just like, this
Right.
is insane. Like, this
Right.
makes no sense. And they just want people to like have strong feelings.
Mm.
And so I don't know. I like that you didn't have a definitive take on it because that seems more fair to the story to me.
Well, I appreciate that. I like to try to be fair. That's if anything, I'm
Yeah.
fair. No, I'm joking. But now, so you keep bringing up basketball, so I'm gonna get it out of the way. Favorite teams, college and
Indiana
pro.
Indiana Pacers. I'm sorry. I spend way too much time watching basketball. I don't mean to keep bringing it up.
You're
Um,
good. I'm from North Carolina. College
oh,
basketball is the world here, so you'll never annoy me talking about basketball.
did you go to University of North Carolina, or you're from that
I,
area?
my sister went to UNC and was
Okay.
a UNC dance team member. She was graduated last year. I went to UNC Greensboro, which is not UNC, no matter what people say. But no, I just grew up a Tar Heel fan. Uh,
Okay.
just lifelong Tar Heel fan, and we are in the Sweet 16, and it feels great.
I had an internship training in college
Mm,
where I went down to it was on UNC's campus,
mm,
and it was funny because it was the summer before the NBA draft where Marvin Williams and Raymond Felton got drafted. And I was playing pickup basketball with all these people, and we were like terribly not athletic. And Raymond Felton and Marvin Williams came out and played pickup with us, and we got
wow.
so smoked. It was unbelievable. I mean, it shouldn't be unbelievable. I mean, Marvin Williams, I think, went fourth in that draft, and so
Right.
we were just a bunch of random dudes just getting crushed by them. But North Carolina humidity is insane. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm an Indiana Pacers fan. College, I don't really have a team.
Mm.
I growing up, I liked Duke just because they liked Alaskans, and I'm from Alaska, so they
Uh,
had like Trajan Langdon and Carlos Boozer,
mm.
and so I liked the fact that I had the Alaskan loyalty. It was weird how the only players who played college basketball happened from Alaska happened to go to Duke, but whatever. Anyway, so I like them. Now I kind of just like random teams. Like I always seem to like Villanova.
Mm.
Like I really liked them. I mean, when there was the Jalen Brunson and Mikal Bridges and Josh Hart team, I love that team. I love a lot of like they always have really good guard play, and
Hmm.
so I always really like them. But yeah, it's I often find myself attracted to like the weird like Murray State racers or like
Mm.
whoever is going into the tournament that's really unexpected. Those are normally really fun. So, but Pacers are um, my team. I would say that I like basketball and the Indiana Pacers in specific considerably more than I like comics.
Got you. Got you. I'm gonna forgive you for mentioning Duke and Villanova in the
I
same
know, I know. I'm
sitting of
sorry.
questioning. Like,
Duke
jeez.
Duke to a UNC fan is rude.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Duke to a UNC fan is I guess rude. Villanova to a UNC fan is just cruelty though. Like that's just
Really? Why Villanova in specific?
so that last championship run. Well, not the last one. We won in 2017. In 2016, we were a 3-point shot away from winning
That was
the
the Brunson,
national
Bridges,
championship.
and Hart team, wasn't it?
It was. And
Yeah.
we tied the game up on a last second 3-pointer from Marcus Page. Although it wasn't quite a last second 3-pointer, there was like 2 seconds left on the clock, just enough for them to run down and make a three to win it all. And I was crushed,
I'm
but
sorry.
it's okay. I'm over it. Uh, in 2017, I think the big call, the big key word was redemption, and they
Oh
won
yeah.
it. They won it the next year, so it was cool.
Hey, at least you have that. Okay, so I'm again from Alaska, and
Mm,
so I always say I'm a free agent fan, and so I became an Indiana Pacers fan because I saw Reggie Miller choke the flash or flash the choke sign at Spike
mm,
Lee when he scored 25 points against the Knicks in a fourth quarter to beat them in the playoffs. and I fell in love instantly. So that's my team. The Seattle Mariners I'm a fan of because for baseball because regional, but also because I was 5 when Ken Griffey Jr. started playing,
Hmm.
and Ken Griffey Jr. is probably remains to this day the single coolest person I've ever witnessed in my entire life.
Yeah.
And then I'm a New England Patriots fan, much to many people's chagrin, because my dad was from the same area that Drew Bledsoe's from.
Mm.
And when I was 9, I was really into sports cards. And my dad bought me a Drew Bledsoe rookie and told me that I was a fan of him now and that we need to watch this New England Patriots team. And they were pretty bad for a while, but
Hmm.
obviously they eventually got really good. And so those are my 3 main teams in sports, and one is in New England, one is in Indiana, and the other one's in Seattle. So there, it makes no sense.
Yeah, that's odd. But it's real fandom stories. I think that's the cool part because now like nobody's a fan of teams. We're all fans of players. It seems like I'm a diehard North Carolina Tar Heel fan, but in the NBA, it's kind of like whatever team LeBron plays for at the moment. Um, I've got a bit of a loyalty to the Knicks because my grandfather was a diehard fan, so it's just fun to root for them, like in his memory. But I don't know who I'm gonna really like care about when LeBron leaves the league.
Yeah.
So
The
it's
good news is
interesting.
he's never going to because he's always going to be good. Do you know Sanford Green at all?
And yes, yes.
Sanford is the first person I had met that is just a LeBron guy too.
Mm,
And he's like, I'm a Lakers fan now because he's on the Lakers. And I just remember being like, that is so strange. And then I gradually realized that he's exactly right. And you're exactly right. A lot of people are just player fans now,
mm.
which there's nothing wrong with that. But growing up, it was like the idea that you could like switch allegiances for fans. That's like betraying your family. It's like you
Yeah,
becoming a Duke fan all of a sudden.
yeah, yeah. No, it's weird, right? I was a Giants fan forever, right? And Cam Newton is playing for the Panthers. It's like during that undefeated season. Um, and I put up, that's the thing. You got to like announce your allegiances, right? If you're going to switch teams, it's got to be public. So I put up on my Facebook, like, hey, before this Super Bowl game, just so you guys know, as long as this dude is lined up behind center, I am now a Carolina Panthers fan,
Yeah.
right? And then he was lined up behind that center for like a season and a half. And now I feel like I can't go back to the Giants. The Panthers suck. Like, what do we do now?
Yeah, exactly. It is funny though because I have this theory that everything is turning into sports basically.
Mhm.
And like whether it's like political conversations or if it's about like, comics or whatever. But it is interesting. There's not a lot of comic book creator sports fans. There's not a lot of overlap unless you include wrestling, in which case
Mhm.
there's a
A
shitload of
lot of it.
overlap. Yeah, a lot. The comic people love wrestling. I don't watch wrestling at all, so I have no idea. But it is interesting because I feel like a lot of the same energy goes into like sports fandom as it does comics fandom.
Hmm.
And I don't know. It's funny how like those sides are so clearly delineated and
Hmm.
yet they are extremely similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah. No, I can see it. Right. You got your Marvel people, your DC people.
Yeah.
You got like the
Yeah.
people who, for whatever reason, feel like they're being like quirky when they say they're fans of indies, right? In the same way that's like that liking Coldplay makes you an eclectic hip hop fan. Like,
Wait, what? Did you say eclectic hip hop fan?
yes, like so that maybe it's just because I'm black, right? But there was a period where like it was hip hop and that was it. And then Jay-Z kind of like told the world that Coldplay existed, or at least
Okay.
the hip hop world that Coldplay
Sure.
existed. And then like the mark of like a true music fan was like, I don't just listen to hip hop. Like I like Coldplay too. And it's just like, okay, sure,
That's
guy.
amazing. I had absolutely no idea that was a thing that happened, but when you said eclectic hip hop fan, I was just like, Coldplay is like the least hip hop band that has ever existed, probably.
Right, right.
Maybe not, maybe not. I do like Coldplay though. So, I mean, once upon a time I did, but yeah, I don't know. It's fandom is a weird thing, isn't it? I mean, it's
Yeah.
just like I don't know. I mean, like I'm a fan. I watch Formula One with my wife and a friend,
Mm,
and there's this guy who I became a fan of because when I first watched a race, this was like 12 years ago or something like that. it said on the screen Hulk, 4 letters, Hulk. His name's
Huh.
Nico Hulkenberg.
Huh.
And I've been a fan of him ever since, like hardcore fan. This like German dude who like his most famous thing is he's driven the most races without ending up on a podium out of anyone in F1 history. He is famously not bad at driving, but famously not good enough to actually matter. And yet he keeps racing, and I kind of love him for it, you know? It's
Right.
just like he's a grinder, and he's just managed to make a career out of being like, I'm adequate. That's me, Nico Hulkenberg.
If
All
he ever
because I was like, I saw a comic book name on the screen, and I was like, I like this guy.
uh, if he ever wins, does that change your fandom of him? Does that take away some of the mystique or
I might cry. I'm not gonna lie, I might cry. My wife and I were in France last year, and because it was like really early in the morning. We were watching the Australian Grand Prix as we got ready, and there was this catastrophe that happens where all of a
Mm.
sudden, like he was in like sixth place or something like that, and there was a restart, and like 3 people crashed out immediately, and like immediately everyone was like, "Oh my God, Hulk is gonna get a podium," and they did this thing where they were just like, "No, it was too much of a catastrophe. We're gonna finish the race as it like had restarted with that order." And I have never felt more aggrieved as a sports fan in my entire life than the fact that they wiped this out for just arbitrary reasons.
That's insane.
It was really weird. It was really weird. Justice for Hulkenberg. Anyways, I can't believe I'm talking about Nico Hulkenberg.
Hey, listen, it's a comics podcast. We talk about Hulk all the time.
Yeah.
So speaking of, right, you're talking about fandom, and I think we all, to a degree, get into this because we're comics fans. I think some people may have some delusion that, getting into this might make them like get them fame or like attention in some way. But I think for the most part, all of us who get into this get into it because we're fans. But you've already talked about like 2 pretty big hobbies that you have that aren't comics. My camera just did something weird, but you can still hear me, right?
Yep.
Cool. We'll let it go. But yeah, so 2 big hobbies that aren't comics. Do you still read for fun?
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I actually just ran an article on Sketched that was
Hmm.
about how making comics changes the experience of reading them.
Hmm.
And the bulk of creators basically said effectively it turns it into homework,
Yeah.
where you can't read for fun because you have to read for research, and you don't even really have time to read for much more than that because of the fact that you're always working. But then on top of that, you view the medium differently because you know how it works now.
Yeah.
And I do think to some degree that that happens with me just
Hmm.
because I'm so in the weeds that I can't help but know like this is how things work.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I think that I still delight in a great comic in the same way that I always have.
Hmm.
Maybe not when I was like 8 and I was going to start crying because Wolverine lost his adamantium when Magneto pulled it out of his body.
Right.
Apparently, I'm near crying a lot when it comes to Nico Hulkenberg and Wolverine's adamantium. But um, it's like I'm not having those sorts of reactions. But I just when you come across a comic that really surprises you, that you really just absolutely are like blown away by, I
Hmm.
still feel as the same love,
Hmm.
and I still probably read about as much lately. To be honest, I do these sketched awards every year where I share my favorite comics and creators of the year. And again, going back to the an earlier question where you're like, you got to do this job right.
Hmm.
So I read everything that I can
Hmm.
possibly get my hands on, and I look at what everybody else is talking about, make sure I read that so I have like a definitive. This is what I really think is the best because,
Hmm.
or my favorites because I want to give everything the time it needs. I read so many comics that I get really burned out
Hmm.
through that process. And so basically from January until now, I've been reading very few comics and just reading books at night.
Hmm.
And I feel kind of bad because I'm really backed up and my like I think my nightstand is going to break from the weight of all the comics that are up on it
Hmm.
now. But it's just I think one of the things you have to think about, like a way to not turn on something that becomes a job for you, is
Hmm.
not forcing yourself when you don't have to do it. And I think I've figured out a pretty good balance for that. But ask me again next week, and I might have a different answer.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I think I think in a way you might be, well, no, because you're reading everything. Like I've wanted to do an award type show, mostly because my platform is comics are dope. And so obviously I called the award the Dopey Award.
I
And I
like
just
it.
feel like the Dopies is a great name for an award,
Hmm.
but there's no way I could like objectively say this is the best, right? Well, I mean, I guess all of it's subjective, but it's like there's so much that would never come into my purview. Like, I don't read horror. So much of indie comics are horror right now.
A lot of horror.
Like it's a lot of horror, and the stuff that's not horror is like a lot of sex sometimes. Like, I don't read either. And so it's like, can I say that, I don't know, Darkwing Duck was the best comic of 2024? Like, probably not, right? Because I'm just omitting so much else from the field. So it feels wrong to say, all right, well, here's the best thing. I could say it's the best of what I read, but like, what does that mean to anyone?
Well, I mean, here's my loophole. I like to say favorite instead of best because I don't feel like I can say best.
Hmm.
And the thing is fundamentally, I think what you do and what I do to some degree, actually what we both do,
Hmm.
is, people follow personalities.
Yeah.
And to some degree, it's like they don't want to know what is the actual best. They want to know what your favorite is because if they're following you, they care about your perspective. So
Yeah.
I think you're appropriately armed with the ability to do that because you may not have read everything, but amongst what you've read, you know what's your favorite, and it's Darkwing Duck.
That's
I
true.
have no idea. Is there an
That's,
actual Darkwing Duck comic now?
yeah, Dynamite's got the license. They
Oh,
did
okay.
10 issues now. Roger Langridge has a Justice Ducks
Oh,
series.
nice.
So yeah, it's Darkwing Heaven. And then they got a whole bunch of gargoyles out right now as well. This year feels like it's been the year of the licensed comic, like
Thundercats,
Thundercats, Darkwing, uh,
Transformers.
Transformer. Yeah, like, and then Dynamite's got more stuff coming with like WB. There's a Johnny Quest comic coming. Um, Space Ghost is coming, I think,
Oh,
next month.
nice.
Um, and then they've got the Disney Hercules is coming. Like, so there's a lot of like licensed stuff. A lot of animated properties. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think all of those fit that category.
Can I tell you a random Darkwing Duck associated fun fact?
Sure.
I don't know if you remember this, but like I don't know, like 10 years ago, there was like this what wasn't a meme then, but would now be considered a meme,
Hmm.
is like the thing that was going around where people like, who's your celebrity lookalike?
Hmm.
And so people would share pictures of their celebrity lookalike. And my friend told me once upon a time that my celebrity lookalike is Launchpad McQuack. And so I just posted a picture of me next to Launchpad McQuack. And I
Uh-huh.
was like, I have no idea how she possibly turns me into a duck.
Uh-huh.
But she's not totally wrong. I think it might be a personality thing, but
Right.
whatever. Apparently, I'm Launchpad McQuack. I can't even be Gizmo Duck. I'm Launchpad McQuack.
What's terrible is I can see it. I can see when you once you've said it, I can see it.
Yeah, it's better than what I normally get because my hair, I often get Jimmy Neutron, which
Right.
is very insulting.
Yeah, it's either Jimmy Neutron or Ace Ventura, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you got the perfect Ace Ventura jacket right now. So
I know. Again, I did not plan this. Also, fun fact: this is reversible, so you have the
nice,
extremely intense side going right now.
nice. It's the party side.
Exactly.
Um, so yeah, a lot of licensed comics going on right now. I also read way more superheroes. I've gotten to the point. This year will be my fifth anniversary, right? And I've gotten to the point where I can kind of see the strings on all the superhero stuff. And that does make it a bit less fun for me. Like you kind of feel it resetting or not resetting, or not doing anything, like feeling
Right.
like afraid to kind of move the needle in either direction. Um, but yeah, I still enjoy comics. It's still fun, like the experience every time. So I'm
Yeah.
loving it.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
so your decision to put, like, so when I'm looking for all these different sites, like, okay, well, who's doing comics journalism well? I think we kind of look around. It's like, okay, there's this travesty. There's gossip sites. There's hate mongering people on YouTube, and there seems to be no like real journalism. And when I could find an example of good journalism, and this isn't unique to comics, but like literally everywhere, Like there was an article about Diddy to date this episode, Diddy's house getting raided yesterday or today, whatever it was. And I go to click on it because some dude got arrested, and they're like, actually, this article's just for subscribers. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, every news site on the internet is for subscribers. What was behind your decision to go behind a paywall, and how tough was that for you?
So I originally did Sketch for 1 year from 2015 to 2016. And
Hmm.
during that time, I made $0. I
Hmm.
didn't have ads. I didn't want to have ads. Um, I think that's associated with my day job too, where it's just like I know how that stuff works, so I'm just
Yeah.
like I don't want to deal with it. And also, it just makes sites read poorly, so I didn't
Hmm.
want to deal with that. And after I finished, Heidi McDonald from The Beat wrote an article about how you get what you pay for and how like sites like mine go away because they don't get sustained by like support, financial support.
Hmm.
And I was pissed. I was like, that is not why I stopped this site. I stopped
Hmm.
it because I was tired and I couldn't do it anymore because I was writing so much. And then I wrote for The Ringer, which is a website that like does like sports and pop culture. It was like my dream site
Hmm.
to write for because I always wanted to write for Grantland and I love Bill Simmons and a lot of the other people who did stuff there. And I wrote an article for them about Image's God 30th anniversary. I think it was 30th anniversary, maybe
Hmm.
25th. I don't know. It was an anniversary that was a five or a zero, and I got paid for that. And I was like,
Hmm.
Heidi was right. Getting paid is awesome.
Yeah.
And I still didn't like ads. I really liked The Athletic and I really
Hmm.
liked this basketball site called Cleaning the Glass, both of
Yeah.
which were subscription based.
Hmm.
And I reached out to the guy who did Cleaning the Glass and I asked him like how he did it and he used this service called Memberful that was eventually bought by Patreon and
Hmm.
it's a way to do subscription stuff. And I realized that the stuff that I do is never going to be like CBR or like
Hmm.
comicbook.com. I'm never going to produce enough to make advertising something that's going to make money for me in a real
Right.
way.
Right.
But I know that the people who really care about what I'm writing about will financially, or okay, I shouldn't say I know. I hoped people
Hmm.
would do that. They would back it. And to be honest, I don't love paywalling things. I don't want to paywall things, but at the
Right.
same time, I also know that it's the only real way to like make money off of what I do.
Hmm.
And I also know how much work I put into it, which is far, far too much to the point where my wife regularly puts my face on milk cartons just to taunt me about my missing nature. That's not true. She doesn't do that. Sounds like a thing she would do though.
Right.
But anyways, yeah, so I just needed a way to monetize it. And
Hmm.
so what I do is I put certain articles behind paywalls. The podcast is funded by Patreon, so I don't paywall that.
Hmm.
I will like there's some articles where I won't put it behind the paywall. Quite often over after time I'll remove the paywall just to make sure that people can read it.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean it's proven to be pretty effective at like monetizing the work and making it so like I actually have financial support. Like between that and the podcast on Patreon,
Hmm.
I like make a decent amount of money. Not enough I'm quitting my day job by any
Right.
means, but it's not bad for a pure side hustle, especially given the fact that like I, I again I'm revealing a lot of my weird like beefs with stuff, but I
Hmm.
don't I don't like podcasts being overwhelmed by advertising.
Yeah.
And so I have a rule where I only allow two podcasts on every episode or two ads on every episode.
Hmm.
And I only will do reads that I do myself. I won't
Hmm.
do like, I don't know, MeUndies where they're talking about underwear in some other person's voice.
Right.
And so, because, you said it earlier, it's like an art form, and I want to make sure that it's a good experience for listeners.
Yeah.
So if I wasn't such a, I don't know, idiot, I would probably make a lot more money off of this, but
Hmm.
I just have my weird standards that I have to live up to. So, long story short, I have complicated feelings about the paywall, but it's necessary because nobody wants to pay for anything on the internet anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I ran into that right. Like, and I've got this whole document somewhere. I literally wrote on paper, like just my ideas and okay, well, how could I do this without a paywall? And the answer is you can't, right? You're going to burn out. Like you're going, because there's always a cost. There's opportunity cost, if nothing else, right? Like you taking time to have a conversation with me, it's time that you're not spending with your wife. It's time you're not spending at your job, right? Like, so
Well,
there's
thank
always
you
a
for that.
cost. Like, yeah, no problem. No problem at all.
Not the wife part, the job part. I don't
I,
want to. I'm good not doing my job.
right. Right. But it's like, but it's like, time, your time is valuable. Right. And the
Yeah.
older I get, the more valuable my time seems to become to me, even if it doesn't equate to dollars.
I mean, one thing that associates with this, it reminds me of I did a survey once of
Mm,
retailers where I asked comic shop owners, where I asked them, what is like the biggest competition for you? And the answer really surprised me. It was one of them said Netflix. And I
hmm
hadn't thought of that, but the way that they meant it was that there's a time conflict, there's a cost in
Yeah.
time, and it's like every minute you're watching, I don't know, One Piece,
hmm
which is a funny pick because it's based off of manga, but whatever. But anyways, every minute you're spending watching One Piece, you're not spending it reading comics.
hmm
And so I honestly think that's like the biggest problem with entertainment today is like how am I supposed to watch the new Roadhouse if I'm spending all my time writing about comics and podcasting and doing my day job and stuff? And the answer is I have not watched Roadhouse yet, although I'd very much like to.
Yeah. No, that's what happened for me, right? Like YouTube and reading comics replaced television for me, which for
Hmm.
me, that was fine because we were kind of looking for, I don't know, again, not to make this super religious or anything, right? But just with like my journey in faith, it was like, all right, there's some stuff just on TV that's like not productive for me, right?
Sure.
So looking for other entertainment alternatives, I kind of stumbled into comics. I got into comics like to get my daughter into art,
Sure.
and somehow I ended up with the weekly habit. Um, and then, I've had other YouTube channels before. Like I think I've got a music marketing channel because, like you, I'm a marketer by trade. So I did freelance marketing for musicians and small businesses. Um, so I had YouTube was already a thing I was doing before I knew like that comics still existed, right? And now 5 years in, like I just enjoy talking about comics on YouTube. I was very surprised at the difference between like just the resources available, right? Like my music marketing YouTube channel, I could put out like one video a month and easily make 5 times what I make on the comic channel. And on my comic channel, I post videos 3 to 5 times a week. Like it's just insane the income disparity. And so it's like, and I don't even write comics, right? When you start talking to creators, it's like it's a lot worse. And so it's like, how does anyone do this except that they just love it? Um,
I think that's a lot of it. I mean, I am interested though in how much of that do you think is how much YouTube and the way that that works
mm,
and just the saturation of content has shifted since you were doing that because like that I'm sure that's not an inconsiderable factor either.
yeah, I think one thing I've noticed is like the comic community is small, but
It
like it
is.
rides really hard, right?
Yeah,
Like
it does.
the names that I see in my comment sections when I do watch other people on YouTube, it's the same names. Like it's the same people and they just ingest so much comic book content. And it's dope. And then you see, even if I like dig into like my affiliate like analytics, like in conversion rates, like you notice that it sort of has hit like critical mass and it's like there's a point where you're talking about comics and you've got one bucket. And then the only way to expand past that is either to like do something like crazy, like sensational, right? Like whether it's outrage baiting or talking about like current events or gossip or whatever. Or you like just go straight for a broader audience. You start talking about like movies and other media.
Right.
And
Right.
that's when like the sort of glass ceiling breaks, but it does feel like the comic audience is super finite, which for whatever reason drives me to like, as a marketer, be like, nah, we can fix it. We'll just YouTube harder.
That's always the solution, just more and harder. Boom.
Right. It's
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it is tricky. It's interesting. Like in that piece about podcasters, I mentioned Brad and Lisa Gullickson from Comic Book Couples Counseling, and they were saying that they had done podcasts about movies
hmm
and gotten basically no traction whatsoever. But as soon as that they started the podcast,
hmm
instant traction.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for how hardcore comic fans really are.
hmm
Where, I mean, every single one of them is like a peak LeBron fan, where it's
Yeah.
just like LeBron walks on water. Like for them, it's just like they will be obsessed with like something that they love. And you know what? I respect the hell out of it.
Yeah.
I think that's great. It's like people, there's worse passions to have than like, I love the X-Men.
Right.
Um, and so I definitely support it. But it is interesting. It's like it's a small group, but their intensity is extremely high.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of like college basketball, right? Like, who cares about the Indiana Hoosiers outside of Indiana, right?
No
Like,
one, no one.
unless your program just becomes the powerhouse that is constantly sending dudes to the NBA, right? Like, you know, your coach K, well, he's gone, right? But it's Duke, it's Carolina, it's UCLA, or it's Kentucky, like, and that's kind of everybody else is super local. And that's what comics feels like to me, is like college basketball.
Comics are Gonzaga. They're just like they're always good. They try really hard, but they're still Gonzaga.
Right.
And so they have 5,000 fans, but all of them are nutcases.
Nutcases. Which I love it. I love like just, I don't know. The older I get, the more I can appreciate just being a fan of something, like being diehard about something.
Right.
Um, so we've talked about like this sort of art form of podcasting. What would you say makes a great interview?
I think it depends on the person. I
Mm,
think that it I have like kind of different flavors. Like for first time guests, I normally do a kind of career spanning conversation. And
hmm
then there's other ones where I'll do ones that are more focused on a single project and we'll kind of get or like current projects and we'll get into that. Over time I've kind of gotten to the point where most of my podcasts are just conversations in the maximum sense of that word,
hmm
where like I had a podcast with Kieran Gillen, the writer of X-Men Forever and Rise of the Powers of X,
hmm
and I saw like that traffic was coming in from a Reddit, and I was on like this X-Men subreddit, and this person posted like kind of like the important details that they got from an X-Men standpoint in the
hmm
comments, where like it was linked to, and then they're like, "This is what you need to know. This is what he says," and
hmm
he's just like the first thing the person said was just like, to be honest, he's like mostly talking about writer stuff and like life and everything, and it's like, but he also said this and this and this,
Right.
and I think that stuff is more interesting to me,
Yeah.
where I can ask like, why did you have Batman punch the Joker like that?
hmm
And that's not that interesting to me. But if I talk to people about why they do things or how they do things and like how it affects them and how they see the world and how like they fit within comics as a medium and as an industry, that's interesting to me.
hmm
And um I to be honest, like here's a reality of what I do. There's a version that I could do what I do where I actually think about what people want. And I think that maybe it would be more successful, but I think it would be worse.
hmm
And the reality is I never think about what anyone wants besides me when it comes to this stuff. And that might sound super selfish, but I don't know how else to do it, if that makes sense.
No, that's the sound bite that I'm gonna put at the beginning of this episode. No, but no, yeah, no. I think that's what art is, right? Like, there's what you do, and in order for it to like, do you get the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? If Eastman and Laird cared what anyone else would have said about it,
No.
right? Like, there's what it becomes once you give it to the world, right? Like they'll add their things to it. They'll make them eat pizza, whatever, right? But the purest creation has to come from you with no sort of noise from the outside. And I think when it comes to interviews, I feel like, and maybe it's just because I grew up with the internet, like we grew up with this access, and so for me, I often will fall in love through or with a work by falling in love with its creator first, right? Like Christopher Priest is a great example of someone whose work I had not read before I like learned him and studied him and have had conversations with him. And then you go back and you see different works. Like I'm reading Black Panther right now, and Priest
Like
used to
Priest
be,
Run?
yeah, the Priest run of Black
Yeah.
Panther. And he used to be a pastor. And there's like this super quick like mention that Mephisto says like I can only operate like where I'm allowed, right? And that's like just a straight up like, that's a theological tenet, right? Like there's
Hmm.
no such thing as like demon possessions. Like demons work off permission to like be hosted, basically. Right. And it's a throwaway line in Black Panther, but talking to priests, and he's like, well, I put stuff in when I can put it in, and so on and so forth. And then you see it in the book, and it just kind of illuminates it in a different way. And so for me, I'm asking the questions that I wished I could ask, right, as a
Yeah.
fan, but also just as a person. And sometimes it is what was behind the decision for Batman to punch Guy Gardner, but other times it's just
Well,
like, what's it like being the only black guy in a room? You
yeah.
know, or what are you thinking when you sit down to write a story? Like it's fun for me.
Yeah. I will say asking about Batman punching Guy Gardner is always allowed, no matter the type of podcast, just because that is an incredible scene. But yeah, I mean, it is really interesting. I mean, it's like you're talking about with Priest. It's like I think this ties into what you were saying about like the cyclical, like the you can see the strings when it comes to
Hmm.
superhero stories and stuff. I think part of the reason why superhero comics are so effective and also why they can kind of go through doldrums is they're always best when the creators are able to really make their mark. And there's
Hmm.
times where they're less able to make their mark because of universal needs or
Hmm.
editorial doctrine or whatever. And that creates a situation where the comics are just less interesting than they were at one point. And like when you get something like when Priest and God, who was the artist? Was MD Bright do some of that? I don't remember who the artist was on that run.
Uh, Mark Teixeira.
Oh yeah, Mark Teixeira, yeah. Which always threw me off because there was a New York Yankee named Mark Teixeira, and I was just like, "There's two Teixeiras?
Right.
What?" Um, anyways, the like you get them, or like that was the Marvel Knights time. So you get Marvel Knights,
Hmm.
and then you get Jay Lee, and you get Paul Jenkins doing
Hmm.
Inhumans, and you get Kevin Smith and Joe Quesada and Jimmy Palmiotti doing Daredevil, which leads into Bendis and Mac and Alex Maleev doing Daredevil. Like that whole era, like that was coming off of Marvel being bankrupt. And the
Hmm.
reason why they were able to do that was because they had no other answers available to them beyond just like, let's try something different and hope for the best. And
Right.
it resulted in some awesome comics. I
Yeah.
can't believe I didn't say Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon on Punisher. Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon on Punisher.
Right. Yeah. Nah. It's fun. Like I think we're in a weird space right now. Like just, I mean, DC's been sold like 8 times since I started reading comics 5 years ago. Like there's so much upheaval. Um, and so it's just, I feel like the stories in some ways reflect it, but at the same time, we get really cool, really fun things. I just feel like those things aren't allowed to really develop in the ways that they could.
Sure.
We're rebooting series after like 12 issues, like no matter what, like, I don't know. It's,
I mean,
it's,
that's one of the things for me as a collector because I have right over here is a billion long boxes,
hmm.
and one of the things that was really strange to me was like for years and years and years having just like one run
Hmm.
of Uncanny X-Men, and then now I think we're gonna be on volume 8 or something like that,
Hmm.
or like something like I Love the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl by Ryan North and Erica Henderson and Derek Charm and everybody, and that book rocks, but it was it had a new volume after its eighth issue.
Hmm.
And then it like had the next volume was the rest of it. But it's funny because it goes one through eight, and then it
Hmm.
goes one through I want to say 41, and that's just how it works.
Yeah.
It's so strange. And the I do think that one of the things that people don't really think about as often as maybe they should, and maybe it's just because you don't want to, and like who wants to think about art in this sort of way, but so many of the decisions that are made from a practical sales standpoint. Like
Hmm.
you need to restart this because number one, sell better. And
Right.
so you just do this over and over and over. But when you do that over and over and over, it kind of desensitizes people and it just doesn't make it feel
Hmm.
special anymore.
Right.
And so there's like I don't know, it's such a weird industry. It doesn't make a lot of sense in a lot of ways, but it's what we got.
Yeah. No, I was listening to you. I think it was you and your wife talking
Oh,
about things in the comic industry that just don't make sense to you, like, or that didn't make sense to her. And then, like, now that you think about it, like, wait, that doesn't make sense to me either. I just kind of live with it. Right.
yeah.
And I just related to that so well. Because it's like,
Yeah.
for me, I'm newer to all this. Like I said, I'm only 5 years into like reading comics. And there's so many times where I'm just like, why do we do that? Why do we accept that?
Yeah. It is. It's really strange. It's like one time I tried explaining a joke to somebody that was off of Twitter, and they go
Mm,
like, "This makes no sense." And in a weird way, like Twitter is like a different language.
mhm,
You're trying to convey something that has set rhythms to it that just only makes sense if you speak Twitter. And I think
mhm,
the same thing was with comics. It's like if you've grown up fluent in comics, this stuff not only makes sense, it's the way things are. But as
mhm.
soon as you explain to somebody else, you're just like, wait, my world is a lie. None of
Right,
this makes sense.
right, right. So, all right, I'm gonna ask this 'cause haven't asked anyone else. Right, the Krakoa era is coming to an end. How are you feeling about it? Have you been keeping up with it?
The Krakoa era. I really have liked the Krakoa era. I think that it's been an interesting time. I don't think it has ever lived up to how great House of X and Powers of Ten were,
Mm,
but that's probably Marvel's highest bar in the past decade. So
mm,
that's not exactly like a tragedy. That's just like how can you constantly live up to the fact that like Marvel produced one of its greatest comics ever.
yeah.
And so it may not have lived up to it, but ultimately I think it's been really good. I think it's ending pretty weird. I think
Hmm.
Rise of the House of X or Fall of the House of X is pretty
Hmm.
bad, much to my chagrin. Rise of the Powers of X I think is awesome, and X-Men Forever is good, even though I think it's out of order. But overall, I think it's good. It's been a great era. I think it could have went on longer. I
Hmm.
don't know. I think the problem is they've kind of lost momentum. So like one of the weird realities is that when the pandemic hit, they were like had to like stretch it out and make more stuff to like
Hmm.
maximize because Marvel needed hits and X-Men was popping at that time. And so they did that, and I think in the process they kind of negatively impacted the Krakoa era.
Hmm.
And it's created something that isn't exactly what it was originally designed to be, but something I think that is really interesting. Like I love the X-Men, the Araco stuff, like the stuff
Hmm.
on Mars. I feel like I'm gonna get yelled at for calling it Mars, but whatever. Some people don't know what Araco is.
Right.
Um, I love that stuff. There's been a lot of really fun stories. It's been really cool seeing like some of like the generation. I grew up as a Generation X fan.
Hmm.
That was like coming out when I was a kid. So like seeing characters like Sync and like Monet do really well in this era has been really awesome. Especially because Sync's power set is so kick-ass. I mean, it's
Right.
just wild. It's like, oh, would you want one power or all of the powers? I'm like, all of the powers, please.
Mm,
Um, anyways, and so it's there's been a lot of good stuff. There's been some bad stuff too, but ultimately, I'm going to call it a net plus. The next era, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, being a comics fan is like a destiny to always feel like you are living the same life again, and you're just like, I've seen this before, and I'm going to see it again. That's the difference between the Krakoa and the era and the rest, though. Is like I've never seen that before, and I
mm,
like that. I don't know. I mean, like the longer I've been reading, the more I want to feel like I'm getting something really fresh.
mm.
And Krakoa felt fresh. What did you think of it?
Well, so Hoxpox got me into comics. That was the thing that made me say, all right, I'll subscribe. And so House of X, and Batman. And everything else you see has spawned from that. But for me, I feel like it started off really strong. Um, I had a NICU baby around the Ten of Swords event, so
Oh
my
wow.
reading started to get spotty either way, but I
Yeah.
pushed through, right? I think by the time Hickman left, I had started to feel like a little disillusioned with it or disenchanted by it, right? Stuck with it. Um, but ultimately for me, it was the constant expansion into miniseries. And it was just
Yeah.
like, how many new titles can I handle? Not this many. And so I ultimately kind of I've checked out and checked back in so many
Yeah.
times. I think the decision to make Rise and Fall monthly titles instead of like bi-weekly like and Powers were, I feel like that was a misstep. I just feel like, I don't know, just agnostic of the story, it would have kept better momentum if we just kind of sped toward the conclusion and then like maybe gave it a break before whatever the
Yeah.
next era is.
I mean, I totally agree in the sense that the reason why the original House and Powers did so well,
Mm,
at least in part, was because they were the only X-Men comics coming out then. And there was
yeah.
like they were alternating, like you just like the story just kept going and going and going. It was hard to not feel like you get swallowed up by that.
Yeah.
And with Rise and Fall, their rhythms are way different. There's still like 11 other books.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I mean, that's the thing is like I had Dave Busing from Comic Book Herald on my podcast recently, and we were talking about this. And the difference between him and me is that he reads everything, and I only what I'm interested in. And
Yeah.
so I'm only reading Fall and Rise and X-Men Forever and Resurrection of Magneto. So
Mm-hmm.
that's still 5 books. That's still quite a bit, but I'm not reading like Dead X-Men, and I'm not reading Wolverine and X-Force and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I checked out on those books a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one thing I like about the Krakoa era is like you can make a line of your own choice
Mm-hmm.
that is pretty interesting. The problem is like I think they from a business standpoint maybe that was a better decision. From a storytelling standpoint it was infinitely worse.
Yeah. 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 And we read the same 5X titles, so
There you go.
there's
I mean
that.
they kind of feel like the important ones, right?
Yeah. Yeah. To me.
I it's that's a tricky word in comics too is like important. It's like Unbeatable Squirrel Girl wasn't important, but it was awesome, so I
Right.
loved it. And I don't know, I always that's one of the tricky things too about miniseries is like forever they always told like everyone always felt like those were like where kind of side stories happened or the unimportant non-continuity stories
Mm-hmm.
happened. And now it's like everything.
Yeah.
And so we're basically kind of telegraphing to everyone that like these stories kind of don't matter and it's just kind of weird.
Right. Yeah. It's weird. It's weird.
Comics are weird and dope though.
And dope. And dope. I think that's a great note to leave this on. So, real quick, where can they find you?
I am on I am on Twitter or excuse me X and Instagram and Blue Sky. I use Twitter the most to be honest because that's where most of the basketball stuff and sports stuff I follow is.
Hmm.
Um, and then Sketched is on Instagram and Twitter, and then also on Blue Sky. Although it's just me, I'm just David Harper at
Hmm.
whatever the hell it is on there. And then Sketched is at sketch.com subscription site. So if you want to read what I'm writing about, like this week, I have a article about comics and podcasting that's going up, as well as a giant mailbag. Fun fact for you though, it's a funny time to promote this. I'm actually taking April off from Sketched because I'm super burnt out,
Hmm.
and I'm giving everybody it off for free. I'm just giving everyone 30 free days, and so they don't have to pay for it when I'm doing it. And so I'm taking April off so I can rebuild my brain and get some stuff going. But and then Off Panel will keep going. I'm going to be having new episodes every week, and you can find that on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all those places, wherever else people listen to podcasts.
Nice, nice. Yeah, your Twitter handle is like the most reminding. It's what reminds me of like the old days of social media when you just kind of made anything your name, right?
Sliced
Like
fried gold.
sliced fried gold. Where does that come from?
Shaun of the Dead, the movie about zombies, starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost,
Hmm.
and it's a line where Simon Pegg's character Sean says, "Now how's that for a slice of fried gold?" And I named my blog about it back in like the 2000s because I love that movie. And
Mm,
then I made it all my handles on social media. It's even for a long time was my handle in video games too. So like if I was playing like Overwatch or like
mm.
whatever, I was Slice Fried Gold. And it's just this funny thing that like one in every like 40 people recognizes a Shaun of the Dead reference. So
Nice.
there you go. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it is funny. That's a different era of the internet. Now it's just like you want to be your name or you want to be something related to your brand, as opposed to
Right.
just like here's three words together that make a nonsense sentence.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm BJ Kicks because I sold sneakers and that was my sneaker website. And then people started calling me that. And I was like, I don't mind that. And now I run a comic channel that was called BJ Kicks. And I was like, well, that's not congruent at all. So,
Hey, hey, I got a pair of Storm Asics X Kit.
uh,
Yeah, so I have there is some overlap, and I have not worn
nice.
them yet. I just got these for Christmas. I really
Nice.
wanted the Storm ones, and I opened up the blind box that these came with,
Uh,
and it was Storm, and I was really happy. But the problem is, I live in Anchorage, Alaska, which is a dirty,
oh,
disgusting mess during the winter,
yeah.
and I don't want to ruin them, so I'm saving them for summer.
Yeah. The Storms, the Cyclops, the Rogue, and the Brown Suit Wolverines. Those were all really dope out of that pack.
The funny thing is my favorites were I think the Storm and the Rogues. Like I like the
Mm,
green. I don't know what it was about that.
mm,
And I did like there was a big part of me because I'm yellow and blue. I do
mm,
like the Wolverine 1975s,
mm.
but those were also like insanely expensive. So I was like,
Right.
I'm not going to go out of my way to buy incredibly expensive Wolverine shoes.
Yeah, I think most people had like a 60% chance that if they opened the box, it'd be the brown suit Wolverines, something like that. And
Oh,
that's what they
really?
made the most of. Yeah. I saw
That
a
makes
few.
sense.
I watched one guy unbox them. He had like three boxes, and two of the three were brown suit Wolverines, and he was so pissed. And I'm like, well, why would you buy three $200 sneakers? Like, don't do that.
Yeah, I got one for Christmas because I'm like
Uh,
I can't possibly buy this for myself because
right.
I would like break into hives. I don't know why. Spending money on myself, no. Somebody else
Yeah.
spending money on me, okay.
Right. Right. Well, look, man, this has been great, man. Thank you so much for taking the time to school a young podcaster. I really appreciate it, man.
You're great at what you do. Thank you for having me on.
And just like that, we are done with another episode of Comics Are Dope, the podcast. Just a quick reminder, the best way to engage with the show is to become a channel member on YouTube. That way you get access to full video episodes of the podcast. In some instances, you get early access to the interviews, and by joining the channel membership at either level, it goes a long way to help keep the lights on around here. So thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you in another episode real soon. Till then, stay safe, stay awesome, and read something dope today. Peace.